Hello, my name is Jonathan, and this is the presentation for my tentative game called Occlusion. And it is going to be a puzzle slash adventure game based around a semi-realistic world that is all in a simulation, but the player doesn't know that until later. I know it's a little bit overdone, but I think it's a very doable project within a month or two. Very, very much accomplishable, and it'll have a relatively interesting art style, I believe. So, I have here just the basic sheet of information about the game, a list of some of the characters. I want all of the characters' names to be like funny, kind of punish, like in a way, right? Kind of hinting that not all is as it seems in the world. Like if everyone's so interestingly or conveniently named is the better word for it. For example, the protagonist being Farsight, uh, a woman being Miss Bella Informa or Miss Informa, etc. Nicholas Soteen, kind of an inside joke on that one, but nicotine essentially, and so on. Every character is going to be somewhat two-dimensional, or kind of represents one particular character trait, I guess. Very, very much foils to each other. Now, when it comes to the locations, this is for the most part final. Like the names are finalized, and then there's going to be a couple more locations that are in the works right now. But the primary name of the town is going to be Atwater. That's where our protagonist is called to investigate. He is a private investigator that is called to check out why people are disappearing from this town called Atwater. The Informa Manor is going to be a primary location within Atwater. It's like the largest building there. The Final Sip, the local bar. Of course, every detective needs to visit the local bar. Letwood, which is where people seem to disappear in this town, which is the town is surrounded by a forest called Letwood, and anyone who enters it typically does not come back out. And then the Blank Gardens, or just the Gardens by the locals. Everyone seems to come here quite often. Nobody really knows why, including the people that go there. They just seem to go there out of habit or ritual, you could say. And then just a basic outline of the game. It's going to be our protagonist Fargo's site. He's called in to investigate this town of Atwood. People are disappearing. In reality, everyone who's a member of Atwood, or everyone who lives in Atwood, is actually a member of a human experimentation on rehabilitating violent criminals. So Fargo included is a violent criminal of some kind, and this is all a experiment to see who is fit to be put back into society or even to attempt to rehab. And the people that are disappearing are just being deemed irredeemable and being disposed of outside of the Letwood. But again, it's all a simulation, not like a digital simulation per se, but I haven't entirely decided if it's going to be like a digital simulation or if it's going to be a physical simulation where people are under the influence of one or another substances that causes them to believe that Letwood is a real place. Or not Letwood, sorry. Well, Letwood, yes, Letwood as well, but Atwater, the town of Atwater. Okay, so that's the general gist of the game. I have some of the characters as well here. These are sketches. They're not representing how they're going to appear in game because it's going to be pixel art. This was just rough concept sketches for what I want the characters to look like. This is going to be Nicotine right here, Dr. Nicholas O'Teen, kind of the hardy, been there, done that EMT character. He is, in a sense, repaying, without knowing it, repaying his habit of taking life by trying to give it back. We have a tentative image of Fargo's site here. I want him to have a much darker, some more reds in his color palette. You can see on Nicotine, he has like a lot of brighter greens and blues because, it's kind of the medical colors, very sterile. Fargo is going to have more blacks and muted reds, maroon, to be kind of more drawn in, a little bit more mysterious, even in his own identity. This is Miss Informa. She's going to be very bright, very gaudy, if you will, very attention grabbing, a gossip, right? Very likes to talk and likes attention, so her color palette is very very bright. So big red dress, lots of gold and turquoise and jewelry, and then green shawls, green trimmings for emeralds, whatnot. This is none of the characters are actually going to appear this way in game. It's going to be done in pixel art, but this is a great reference point for designing those characters. Next, I have. Well, let's do. Let's look at the collectible first. So this is kind of what I'm talking about as far as pixel art goes. It's a little blurry because the PNG does not scale correctly, but this is a 64 by 64 art collectible. It's a little rough. It's not entirely even around the edges. I would like to fill out. It was originally symmetrical for the most part, but then the shadowing makes it not symmetrical, so I need to fill out this side a little bit more to make it appear a little bit more three-dimensional. But you can see it's a gray-scaled heart pickup for health, and it's going to. I want it to be gray because I want it to be obvious, or not obvious, but be a neat attention to detail that the health is not actually real. Like even within the game, the health is not actually real. It's part of a simulation, so the gray is like kind of more artificial, or you know, it's not organic. In other words, so it's very much either looks rotten if you were to describe it as organic, or looks very much man-made, which is the goal. So, but I'm not. I don't want to do all the art in 64 by 64. It is incredibly time consuming, and I honestly don't have that kind of eye for detail, at least not yet. So I believe I'm going to be either using 16 by 16 or 32 by 32 square pixels for the pixel art. And that's going to come up a little bit later. But until then, let's look at some of the environments. So these environments were drawn before I really had an idea of what I wanted to do with the game. But I think they're still very much usable because they kind of fall into the dystopian. Actually, dystopian is the wrong word for it. They kind of fall into the kind of whimsical and misunderstood or misknown, the unknown, I guess is a good word for it, the unknown. I have this area called the Everdark, which could be translated into like some kind of cave system that's around the town or maybe underneath the town, right? And the Everdark definitely works as a title for something that Atwood would house. There's Elsewhere, which I think can be rebranded. Like this is like mushrooms and crystals, but I think it can be rebranded to be maybe a little bit more fantastical than this, because if the last arc of the game is going to be kind of discovering your own secrets, which is the fact that everything's, a test of some kind and you're not even real, then you can get really crazy with what reality turns into. So maybe this is actually very usable in its current state. But I do like the color scheme of like the deep purples on the mushrooms, the green underglow of the crystals. I like this idea a lot. And then finally, the Last Woods. Sorry, not the Lost Woods. The Last Woods. The Last Woods was definitely the inspiration for Letwood, which is people seem to disappear and go missing. It's kind of full of decay rather than life, and it seems very mysterious. Nobody really knows or wants to know what is going on in there or outside of the town of Atwood. And again, a lot of the colors are, yes, greens, but there's also some of the colors that denote decay, right? So blacks, yellows, kind of a darker smudged brown combined with the yellow. Very much looks like moss or mold, which is the goal there. Okay, so that's the general gist and direction that the game is in right now. It's the position that we are at. Some questions I've curated. Number one, how can the characters be made believably real to the player even with such obvious naming conventions? I like the naming conventions of the characters. I like funny, goofy names. I feel like it gives characters personality right away. Like people like characters that have catchy names right away, even if it doesn't make sense why they have them initially. People are drawn to that idea of a character. So how can the characters be designed to be believably real, like be real characters even with such goofy names, right? Because who names their kid? Nicholas O'Teen, right? I mean, maybe that one's more believable, but Fargo Sight, you're never gonna meet someone named that, right? Number two, how best would the core gameplay loop be represented? As a turn-based RPG, a platformer, or some other genre? This is one I'm still mulling over myself. I'm not sure if I want the actual gameplay of the game. So everything I discussed before this was, story, setting, etc. The actual gameplay, which is going to be exploring the town, can be a turn-based RPG. It could be like an overworld where you adventure around and talk to people, but it could also very well be like an isometric platformer or a two-dimensional platformer, at that point a 3D platformer, although I doubt it will be 3D because I'm going for pixel art, but isometric is very doable. And then some other genre that can include a more direct game, like it's not a platformer, but it is definitely like a 2D adventure game. An example of that might be something that's more along the lines of, I don't know, Hades, right, where it's an isometric beat 'em up. That's possible. Okay, number three. Would the pixel art be better suited in 16 by 16 or 32 by 32 for the game? I'm leaning towards 16 by 16, but that doesn't mean everything has to be in 16 by 16. You can definitely have environments and backgrounds done in 32 by 32 if you're doing tiles, because you can put more detail in individual tiles and then use a tiling system to paint over the background and make it look really nice. But in general, What do you guys think? 16 by 16 or 32 by 32? I'm not sold either way myself. And finally, how can the original environment designs be incorporated into a more modern, realistic world? Like we talked earlier about some of these designs. How can these be incorporated into a world that I intend to be more modern? Like, maybe late 90s, early 2000s at the latest. And obviously, this does not look very late 90s or early 2000s. And, I mean, to an extent, this could be argued that, but this is definitely a more medieval flair to it. But I believe it can be adapted, but having input or a helpful tip or direction that the environments can go in would always be useful. Well, thank you very much for tuning in and watching this presentation. I hope to hear some great answers for some of these questions, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much.